Every job interview is a little different because every interviewer is different. But there are some common questions that are asked during interviews, and on this week's episode, we're going to go over a few of the commonly asked questions in interviews and some tips on how to answer them. It's the week of March 2nd through the 6th, and this is the QC Step Podcast. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast. I'm Corey Finneran. I have some events and dates to share with you before we get started here with this week's topic. Teachers, you should be getting information on each of these sent to you. The Blackhawk College Job Fair is coming up here in a few weeks. It's on March 25th, and the hours are from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The TPC Agency Fair is on Thursday, May 7th at the Blackhawk College Gym, and that is from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And the Career Fair for People with Disabilities will be on May 14th at the iWireless Center. So you can get those events on your calendar, and I will talk more about those as we get closer to each event. The last month or so here on the podcast, we've been working through questions that all of you have submitted. And we have another student question this week. A student from Rock Island High School submitted the question for this week's episode. And this student asks, what interview question is asked the most? That's a really good question. And it's kind of difficult to narrow down to one specific question. So instead of focusing on one question, we're going to go over a few commonly asked interview questions, and then we'll give you some tips on how to answer these questions. So the first question that you will likely be asked in an interview, it's not really a question. I guess it's more of a statement, I suppose. But the interviewer will probably ask you to tell them about yourself. And typically this happens at the beginning of the interview. And what the interviewer is looking for is how you communicate, how you carry yourself, how you handle pressure. And sure, they're interested in your answer, but more importantly, they're trying to get to know you. You should absolutely prepare for this situation, this question in an interview. In some ways, what you say will be similar to what you say in your elevator pitch. And if you're not familiar with that term, an elevator pitch, or you might hear it called an elevator speech, is something that you use in networking opportunities or in interviewers to sell yourself and your experiences to an employer. And it's called an elevator speech because in the business world, it might be something that you deliver over the course of a short elevator ride. And it should be fairly short and concise. And if you'd like to learn more about how to craft your elevator pitch and craft your answer to in an interview, tell me about yourself. If you're interested in how to do that, I talk about the elevator pitch, the elevator speech on episode number 56. And you can find the link to that in the summary here underneath this video on qcstep.com. So what you're going to want to do when they ask you to tell them about yourself is, like I said, sell yourself, sell your experiences. Let them know what personality characteristics you have that would make you a good employee. Maybe you have good attendance at school and you're never tardy. Maybe you have good people skills and you understand the value of customer service to the business. You can talk about your work experience if you have some. If you've done any work through the STEP program, talk about the training sites that you've worked at and what responsibilities you had at those sites. And if you don't have any work experience and you haven't been at a training site, you could mention that you're in the STEP program. Tell them that there's a work program at school and that's what you're part of. And the fact that you are in a work program tells an interviewer that you are maybe more serious about work, and that could give you an advantage over other people that are interviewing for that same position. The next question you'll probably face in an interview is, why do you want to work here? If you don't have an answer for this question, chances are you won't be working there. So, this is your opportunity to tell them what you like about their business. Maybe you know other people that have worked there, and you could say that they liked working there, and so you think you would like it too. Or you could say that you like shopping there, and you've always liked their customer service, and you would like to be part of their team. You don't really need to knock their socks off with this, or really any answer in an interview, but you do need an answer. And if you can't tell them why you want to work there, you're not going to be very convincing in that interview. Another question that you will likely face in an interview is that they're going to ask you one of your strengths and weaknesses. Again, if you aren't able to respond quickly with a personality strength, then you're going to be in trouble. So what are some examples of strengths? You're a hard worker. You work well with other people. You're reliable. There are lots of options, but make sure there's truth to what you're saying. You don't want to say that you're reliable and then the employer finds out from your school that you miss 1 or 2 days of school a week and you're frequently late to classes. The tougher question is when they ask you what one of your weaknesses is. You could tell them that sometimes it takes you longer to do math problems, or you could say that you're more of a visual learner and you learn best by watching someone, but once you see someone do it, then you have a good understanding of that task. There's also some weaknesses, and I use air quotes, that you could share that will kind of be strengths in disguise. That's why I used air quotes. And I wouldn't suggest trying this unless you're really comfortable with the situation. But you could say something like, well, sometimes I bite off more than I can chew and I get in over my head because I try to do too much. It sounds like a weakness, but what you're saying is you're such a hard worker that you try to do too much. If you're not sure what you should say to the interviewer when they ask you, tell me what your strengths and weaknesses are, then ask your teacher or ask Gary or Carrie to help you form the answer to that question. The last question we're going to talk about today is this one. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? An interviewer wants to know what your goals and your aspirations are. And again, if you don't have an answer for this, it doesn't look like you have much of a vision for your future. If you plan to go to Blackhawk or any other college or vocational school, talk about that. If you plan on continuing working after high school, then say that you plan on staying in the workforce after graduation and your goal is to move up within the business that you're interviewing with. I don't think that an interviewer will be too concerned with your answer. They just want to make sure that you have one. If you're not sure how you would handle any of the 4 questions, interview questions that we went over today, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work here? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you're not sure what your answer would be to any of those questions, then talk with your step teacher or talk with Gary or Carrie about what your responses should be to those questions. If you take the time to collect applications, fill applications out, turn the applications in, follow up on applications, and then interview for a position, you don't want one of these questions that you can pretty much assume will be asked in the interview to keep you from getting the job. You've put in a lot of work to get to that point, and you want to give yourself the best chance to land the job, and being prepared for these 4 common interview questions will definitely give you a better chance in the interview. You can connect with QC Step through your social networking accounts. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find those links right here at the top of the page, and I use them to share previous podcast episodes that we've done, and I also use them to share articles on employment that I think that you might be interested in. Thank you for listening and watching, and I will be back next week with another student question on the QC Step podcast.